a developer can plug in one line of code and then we're able to ingest whether it's user level data. This person follows this team. This is their favorite player. They've bought, tickets to, nosebleed tickets versus 50-yard line, row one tickets. All the stuff that the client has on users can now be plugged in as context to help personalize content.
Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and I designed this podcast to share stories that are worth telling. Whether it's about somebody going from zero to hero, hero to zero, or simply something in between. On today's episode, we talked to Mark, the co-founder of Vokol, learn about how he went from a disastrous sports injury to where he is now. Let's go ahead and jump into our conversation with him here. Enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and on this episode, we are joined by my friend Mark of Vokol. Now, for those that may not know you by name or by face, a quick 10-second high-level overview of where you are right now in 2026.
Where I am right now, I am in Venice, California, about a half mile from the beach. And the company Vokal, we just launched our API this past week, and we've got automated podcasts getting generated through our sports-specific AI platform in the UFL's app and VIP, a regulated sports book, and a handful of other folks across the sports embedding ecosystem.
I like how you had to start off by rubbing into our face that you're that close to the beach. Thanks, Mark. So let's go back to the earliest possible memory that your brain allows on the very first thing that you ever wanted to be when you grew up, or just a very big interest that you thought there's a potential like, oh, I really like this. Maybe I can do this long form or long term. What was that first idea? And then roughly how old were you?
Oh man. Well, I wanted to be a pro athlete growing up. That was my dream. I was a pretty good athlete in high school. I played football and lacrosse, and I had a devastating knee injury my senior year that sort of ended those hopes. But I think it ultimately was good because it made me focus more on the classroom and ultimately as a 5'10", 165, 170. There's very few sports where I would have been able to live out my dreams on the field. But I knew I wanted to make it a sport someday, and that's part of the passion that led to Vokal. In terms of like having like an aha moment for my career, I used to be in private equity and corporate venture capital, and we acquired a startup. And I saw this founder for the first time, and he was wearing a sweatshirt. He walked into our big office, and he just had this energy. And I was like, that guy is cut from the same cloth as me. I had felt in my finance days that I had to dilute myself a lot, to sit in a cubicle, to wear business casual, and that really isn't who I am. And so I saw this guy, and he had this energy, and his energy was an asset. And I said, okay, that's what I need to do. I need to start my own company where my energy is an asset.
So we're jumping a little far ahead there. So let's rewind just a little bit because I still want to get more information on the pre that event occurring in your life that brought you to wanting to create your company. So rewinding back to wanting to be a professional athlete, how old were you when that essentially career-ending injury happened?
18. Yeah, it was the first game of my senior year of our lacrosse season. Uh, I got cheap shotted. I put a sweet deke on somebody. The slide came from the crease, and the I went to dodge that guy, and the guy that I had just beaten hit me from behind and uh, tore out the ligaments in my knee. Yeah, 18. It was a long road to recovery. Like 6 months on crutches. Had to learn how to walk again. Uh, but ultimately, uh, I can still ski, can still have fun. So, I'll take it.
So from like let's just pick a random number, like 8 years old till 18, this entire time is I'm going to be a professional athlete, love sports, love doing this. There was never any moment during high school before 18 or anything like that where it's like, oh, like if it's not sports, it's going to be this. Was there nothing else coming of interest?
Uh, to be honest, I didn't really, school didn't really resonate with me. I did well in it, but the sitting still in the chair, the being quiet all day long and listening, wasn't what I excelled at. So I felt most at home on the field. Um, if I wasn't going to be a player, I did have dreams of being a coach. So I have a notebook of plays that I drew up for football as a little kid that I never ended up doing anything with. And I often ask myself, like, so I've got a 7-month-old son, and I think about this a lot, where whatever he spends time to work on is a flame I want to stoke. Because I often wonder what would have happened if I had gone to football coaching camp, or what if I had pursued that passion, that interest, more actively as a kid. Um, but yeah, it was always for me, sports was always the thing that made me feel most myself, and like my gifts were the biggest resource. I never really thought about working with my brain until college, until I wasn't able to work with my body, on the field anymore.
Was so the interesting on that creating these coaching plays, is that something like does that notebook still exist somewhere?
It's somewhere in a box in my parents' basement, and
Pounds of dust or top of
yeah,
this box.
yeah, it's like an old papyrus, decaying ancient Egyptian scroll.
So I was thinking, remind me of that is my senior year of high school. I was playing football during the summer. We did like a football youth camp, and it was like this, like there was nothing we had to do. It's just, hey, have fun with the kids, pass, and then like, well, I have a team of six, I versus a team of six, and we just have fun or whatever. But I'm like, oh no, if there's a tournament, like my team of six is gonna win. And so I remember I created my own playbook where like the play names were like ham and cheese and PB and J and stuff like that. And then like
Classics.
I don't know, it just made me think about that. I had so much fun during that summer. So the thing I'm most curious about right now is you you had that injury right at 18. Were you already in like scholarship central essentially? Were you like pretty much on the path to professionally playing before that knee injury happened?
I think realistically, I never really had a chance of being a pro athlete. I could have been a college athlete. So I was getting recruited to play D3 lacrosse. There were some D1 programs where I talked to the coaches, and there was an opportunity to try to walk on. Ultimately, I got into Dartmouth early decision on grades, and chose to go down that route. And thank God I did, because if I had, gone to University of Richmond or some other school where I was getting recruited to play lacrosse, I can't imagine having been as happy as I was at Dartmouth. A lot of intellectual stimulation, a lot of social development, and um, I had a really fun, enriching college experience, and so I'm grateful that I ended up getting in early and choosing to go that path. Even before my injury happened.
So the injury happens, you know the severity of it, like you get the MRIs, like hey, like you're done. What was the very first, I mean, of course, like after all of the, hey, this is my plane, now my plane doesn't exist anymore. And I know you kind of mentioned a little bit like where your path headed, but like, do you have like an immediate thought of as soon as your brain switched from this sucks to what's next, what that immediate first thought was? Or were you stuck in a period of time during this healing process? You said like 6 months on crutches, that it took you a while to like figure it out, or did you already like how quickly did you snap to what's next?
I definitely had a mourning process. Like it was clear, like, my high school, I wasn't going to play any sports again in high school, and the chances of recovering and the road to walking on in college was, you know, very unlikely that that would pan out. So I had a mourning process of like, accepting that reality. Um, but the severity of my injury made it such that PT was like 6 hours a day. So it was
Oh,
like a full-time job to get back to walking again. Um, I got much more intellectually engaged at that point in time. So I started doing crosswords. I started doing the Rubik's Cube. I got to a point where I had solved the Rubik's Cube in 46 seconds. So like I went down the rabbit hole of, okay, I'm not able to be out and active as much as, I'm accustomed to. But I think that's when I really started to use my brain in ways that I wanted to, not just in ways that school required. Um, but I think like I don't know, I haven't thought about this in a long time. For me, the turning point was I touched rim for the first time like a year after my injury. So before I got hurt, I had never touched rim before on a basketball court. And when I got to a point where not only was I walking again, running again, but I was actually doing something athletically that I had not been able to do beforehand, that was like a moment where I was like, all right, I'm ready to turn the page on this chapter and live the rest of my life and stop thinking about what was lost because now I've done something new. I dunked a tennis ball. Not a real basketball, but that was a crowning achievement for me at the time.
That's crazy because I mean I haven't destroyed my knee in terms of tearing all the ligaments and stuff like that, but I can't even imagine how many people have that injury and still do the rehab so they can walk again or relearn to walk again, like you said. But to go beyond that and be like, I want to be able to jump, to be able to launch myself into the air and be able to touch that rim is that's I mean, I guess I would assume that was not an intense plausibility. But then again, I guess there's a lot of NBA guys through rehab and stem cells and whatever it may be come back to the court. Something you said was very interesting because it seems like you and I thought about school the same way, where we it's not we were what was the word you just used? To use your brain how you wanted to and not how school wanted you to. I have said something along those lines without those exact words to a lot of people where like I say like I hated school, but I didn't hate school because I was a bad student. I hate school because it was underwhelming or I was understimulated and it wasn't this type of things. And so when you said like stuff like that, I was like, oh, maybe that's the best way to word like my high school experience is that this is not the how I wanted to use my brain. And then something somewhat related to that today is I don't know if you and I have shared this conversation before, or if you know about this about me, but I'm addicted to escape rooms. I have done over
Mm.
like almost 140 of them right now, and people are like, oh, it's interesting, but it's also a very expensive habit. Like, why do you do this stuff? And for that same reason, is that when you're constantly being thrown time sensitive logic, strategy, pattern puzzles, and all this stuff, it uses a part of your brain that like not your normal day to day routine uses. And so it's like me going to brain gym. Essentially, that's how I view escape rooms. And
Yeah.
I like flexing and I like it getting stronger. And the fact like, oh, I destroyed this room in half the time and stuff like that. I think I'm gonna have to use that when explaining my high school experience. If ever I'm asked about in the future, of it's just I wasn't using my brain the way that I wanted my brain to be used. So
I
yeah,
mean, I could go down this rabbit hole a long way. I mean,
go
I
ahead.
think that the school, at least I grew up in the public school system. The public school system is designed to work pretty well for most people, right? It's not supposed to be a home run for anybody because everyone's needs are so different. But the most common like mental model, school is supposed to support that. And I think that it's pretty common among founders that elementary school, middle school, high school wasn't their favorite period of life because by definition, a founder is trying to break the status quo, right? We're trying to disrupt. And I didn't view school as a disruptive environment. So I think that there's probably a lot of folks that come on your podcast and a lot of, founders that have talked about this where it's, there's a correlation between not feeling like the system is where you're designed to thrive and wanting to build a new system. And I certainly think it, or feel like that helps explain some of my story.
Yeah, I mean that definitely makes sense. It's yeah, I'm still stuck on that. I've been trying to explain to people like not nobody asked me about my high school experience like more than like once every like 20 years. But when it is asked, I'm like, man, why have I never thought of wording it that way? Okay, so anyway, we were rehabbed. You could touch the rim, so you're physically getting back into a shape where, I mean, technically speaking, if you're able to jump, are you? did you have any inkling of maybe there's still a chance for sports? Because now I'm touching the rim. And I wasn't even able to do this before the injury. Did those thoughts start coming in?
I I played recreationally, so no big deal. I'm an intramural hockey champion. Year 2009. So I was able to get my itch recreationally, but you know, I'm not big enough, fast enough, strong enough for to I knew I would get injured again, right? And I didn't have it in me to go through that rehab process again. So, I think about somebody, like Lindsey Vaughn, who's come back from so many big injuries. She's just cut from a different cloth. I had one big rehab in me, and I knew I didn't have another one in me, and so I made the strategic choice to not put myself in a situation where I was the smallest guy in the field, even on another level going to college. But thankfully for intramural sports, and I grew up playing basketball on the blacktop. There's enough uh, competitive casual sports to be played, growing up, that I was able to scratch that itch.
You just gave me nightmare flashbacks of that Lindsey Vaughn
Yeah,
crash again. I was like, oh man. Like injuries are bad for everybody, but when you're getting re-injured from
yeah,
coming back and to get the I'm trying to get the images out of my head now. They showed the boat. I mean, the thing was horrific, of course, but showing the X-ray of her leg of like bones ceased to exist out of how many fractures that there were.
yeah.
But yeah, but I mean, she's a monster, so she's gonna come back, and I don't think she's gonna compete again, but she's gonna get to a point where she's gonna be walking normally. Hopefully, knock on wood. So we finish high school. We're still kind of in that rehab period. When we go to college, we have to choose something that makes the most sense using the parts of our brain we want to use. Now that we have a little bit more control over our education than we did throughout grade school and whatnot. So when you came to choosing your major in college, knowing that for a good chunk of your life it was professional athlete, what did you pull from? What like past experiences, or hey, I did really good with this, I math scores were high, or blah blah blah. What kind of brought you to what you decided to choose as your major?
For me, it was I knew as soon as I got to college, I wanted to study psychology. As a senior in my high school, you could take psychology, and it was the first class that I felt like, oh, I want to learn more about this even beyond studying for the test. I have a number of learning disabilities, and I'm learning in psychology about how my brain operates differently than the normal brain. I really thought that was super interesting. So I also grew up in a really diverse community, Shaker Heights, Ohio, and that really shaped who I am and my interests. And so I studied psychology, and I got a presidential fellowship to study implicit racial bias. So we were trying to understand the extent to which racism is learned versus like an evolutionary construct. So something that, was top of mind for me in a category that I was super interested in, and so that became my focus. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work underneath a professor, Catherine Norris, for a number of years, taking her classes and working in her lab, exploring that topic.
When you chose, so I understand the choosing psychology and the reason you went that route. When you chose that, how long into your degree, into your time in college, did it take you before you're like, this is the exactly after college? I mean, like what you want your job to be, your career to be. This is exactly the type of career I want with the degree that I'm seeking. How
Mm.
long did that come about, or was that something that you went through school the entire time and you didn't really have that vision of this is what I'm going to use this degree for?
So I didn't have a vision for what I would use the degree for. Ultimately, my first job out of college was a pragmatic decision. I had a ton of college debt, so I took the highest paying job I could find. It didn't make me happy, but I was able to pay off my debt in a handful of years, and move on with my life. Um, in terms of how long it took me to figure out my career, I'd say the first 10 years of my career, I felt like I was back in school again. I felt like, oh man, like Dartmouth doesn't do a great job of teaching you about how many different options there are for careers. There's a very strong funnel to do finance. And it took me a while to meet people that had built stable lives doing things other than investment banking, consulting, stock trading. So I didn't have an idea. Like literally, there was that moment where I saw that founder walk into the building after we acquired his company, and that's when I was like, "Whoa!" Like this guy's able to, support his family, change his life, betting on himself, and he's energetic. He's eccentric. He's interesting, and every day is different. So ultimately studying psychology, I find that I think about some of the concepts that I learned in college more than my buddies in finance think about their econ classes. Because ultimately in business, and especially as a startup, it's all about, you're trying to build a product for people to use. You have to understand, okay, why would they use it? How do they think about it? What's their experience of engaging with the product? Or you're trying to sell an investor, you need to tell a story that resonates. There's so many elements of psychology that are relevant to understanding how people think and how they engage with what you're doing. So I sort of like when undergrad kids ask me for advice, I say you should take a psychology class because it's going to be universally applicable. How people think is always going to be helpful. But I just sort of stumbled into that, through my own good fortune that interest of mine happened to be valuable throughout my career.
Timetable wise, from you finishing college to this aha moment that we've referred to once or twice already, how many years span that part of time?
There was 6 years until the aha moment. I graduated in 2011, and it was 2017 when I saw this guy walk into our office building. Um, I then got a job at a startup 2 years later. And I knew like I wasn't going to be able to start my own company right off the bat without any startup experience. So I was fortunate. My wife is from LA. We moved here, and I met a founder who had just raised his seed round. He had some really cool tech, a really cool product that was relevant to some of the experience that I had built. And he needed a business person to figure out how do we monetize it? How are we going to raise money and to negotiate a bunch of deals for data. It was a machine learning product to train the models on. Um, I was there for 4 years. We scaled to a couple million in revenue. I helped raise $10 million in across seed and Series A. Um, and then at that point, I felt like I had sort of my training wheels. LLMs had just launched. ChatGPT had just launched, and I had some hands-on experience, like using OpenAI's APIs before ChatGPT launched, and so I sort of saw this category of LLMs, and I could tell that there was something special. And I was like, okay, I've got the experience that I feel like to, help make me feel comfortable being a founder. I think that there's this new category that exists that's going to change the way that companies are built and the way that software is built. And you know, I decided, okay, this I got to figure out what's the right company for me to start because this is a moment in time that doesn't come around that often. And I ended up, landed on sports just because if starting a company is hard, you got to do it in an area you care about. And I sort of observed that every morning I wake up, I check ESPN. Before I go to bed, I check ESPN. Wouldn't it be great if that was my job? Thinking about, the thing that's on my mind all day long was also my work.
I think you and I have both gotten to the point where if you cut our arm open, we bleed ESPN. It's sports, sports, sports. So you said you finished college at 2011. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have from 2011 2016 with that roughly 2016 with the aha moment. So I know you mentioned the aha moment came from I believe you said when we acquired this guy's company. So let's rewind a bit. What were you doing right outside of college? What was like your first real world job, if you will?
So I was a consultant in the private equity space. So we had clients that were acquiring companies, in every industry from oil fracking to freeze-dried foods to taxidermy. So in 2 years, I worked on 60 deals. None of them were in the same industry. So I got to learn a ton about a whole different types of industries. Uh, and ultimately, my job was to learn how to learn fast, like in 2 weeks, needing to understand the business well enough to value it and to quantify its growth potential. Um, so that was my first job out of college. I ended up then following one of my mentors to join the corporate strategy team of a company that you've probably used their services but didn't know it. The company's called the Giro. They do the roadside assistance programs for all of the automotive manufacturers and insurers. So if you've ever called for a jump start from anyone besides AAA, you probably called a Giro and they said, Progressive Roadside Assistance, how can I help? My job in 2015 was to help make that an Uber-like experience where it was very much app driven, surge pricing to help figure out like make the best match between service provider and end user, and that's when we started buying and investing in startups. So the guy whose company we acquired, he had built a dispatching software that basically allowed us to implement surge pricing right out of the box and like triaging. So, if it's Christmas Eve and there's a family with a diabetic kid broken down on the road in Maine and their battery's off and they don't have any heat, that's more important than me having a flat tire in my driveway. Uh, so the ability to triage that appropriately through machine learning and a little bit of AI, um, that was so yeah, my job was to figure out which startups existed that could help us catalyze the techification from a very rote call center based business to a call center plus machine learning and AI business.
Was this roadside assistance part of like a much larger program, like somebody like Allstate Insurance or AAA? Like, was this part of somebody's thing they already had, or was this more of a third party kind of opportunity?
So it's a third party. Basically, everyone except for the two companies that you mentioned were clients of the business. So State Farm, Progressive,
Everyone
Ford, Toyota.
except for the two that I said.
Yeah, Allstate run. Well, I mean, I think this is 11 years ago now, but
Yeah,
at
yeah.
that time, Allstate ran its own, Geico ran its own. Almost pretty much everyone else utilized a Giro to white label their roadside assistance program. Even OnStar was at one point, connected to the Agiro service offering. And yeah, I mean, the way I ended up there was I didn't know anything about cars. So again, it was really cool to learn about something new. Uh, I knew my boss. I knew that he was super smart and that I was able to learn from him. And that's always been my North Star is my pace of learning accelerating? And I knew that this person was someone that I was able to have my pace of learning continue to accelerate under. And so when he, went to this company and had a slot open for me to join, it was a no-brainer.
So now we've kind of jumped to where we are in this aha moment, to where this aha moment was your aha. I like just saying aha a million times. What was your aha moment to getting you to realizing I need to be, I like this, the aura of this guy. I want to create a company to have that same look and feel. Is that kind of paraphrasing correctly?
I would reverse it. It wasn't that I wanted to have that same look and feel. It was I always felt that my level of intensity was something that when I got to the office, I had to dial it down. And this guy was able to build his company. His intensity was a resource. I mean, I think the hardest part about starting a company is building inertia, like getting it started. And the amount of energy that I bring to everything that I do, um, I saw that in him. And I said, oh, this is the first job that I've seen where you don't need to dial yourself down in the workplace, where you can be your full self and it's helpful versus, getting performance feedback. You're a little bit loud, people in the other cubes, have trouble, when you get excited, yeah, we love that you're excited, but the other people in the cubes, they're on calls. I saw it for the first time. This is a job where the level of intensity that I feel at all times is a resource. So it wasn't that I wanted to look a certain way, it's that I wanted to feel like myself while working.
I got you. Not that you're a toned down version of yourself, but your authentic self on calls, and you don't have to keep yourself quiet, or you don't have to force yourself to be bigger than what you are. That's a that is a very very important attribute to, I think, so many different parts of not just like a job, but just how you present yourself in general. That's what I always tell people on like what people miss when it comes to social media channels. If like you're the face of your own channel, whether it's a personal one or a branded one, like yeah, you'll get followers if you're over the top, like the Jake Pauls, or if you're somebody that's a toned down version. But like I feel like the best growth or the most consistent growth is if you started at yourself and you continue to be yourself, kind of along the lines of what you're just saying there. So we now have this again for the 20th time, this aha moment. Now, is it you knowing just that you want to do something? Do you want to create something? Or did it become more quickly, I know that I want to create something and I know what to create? How did those dominoes fall?
So I started another notebook of company ideas. And what I found was almost all of the ideas, when I would start Googling them, somebody smarter than me had already built a business that was successful like 7 years prior, right? So, I probably had 1,000 ideas of, oh man, this would be pretty cool. Turns out, oh, there's a company that I can just go buy their product. Like, I don't need to build that. Um, and so that's like, that's how the process of like me, I called it the Mark Antal Idea Company. I was like, I just started manufacturing these ideas and then fleshing them out a little bit and then finding out that, for one reason or another, it wasn't worth building that. I also, had the self-awareness to realize that buying companies is not the same as starting them, and digitally transforming $1 billion company is not the same as starting it. So I knew that none of my experience, um, I didn't have any startup experience. So I knew that I wanted to work at a startup before I started something, and I also needed time to have an idea that was worth doing. And I think I got sort of fortunate that 4 years, and maybe it wasn't good fortune, maybe it's sort of, life pans out a certain way, you know, maybe this was a function of joining a startup and getting my sea legs, so to speak. But it took 4 years for me to come up with an idea that, after poking holes in it from every different way that I could, I still came back to it and said, this is a viable business. No one else is winning in this space yet. Uh, I could beat the big players, and this is something that, when times get tough, I'm passionate enough about it that I'm gonna want to keep going down this rabbit hole. So yeah, it took that third chapter, took 4 years of working at another company, learning about tech, learning about company building, learning about raising capital, not just deploying it, and then also having an idea that came to me, that um, proved worthy of building.
So you knew already that you wanted to create something, and so when you worked for this company, you already had the intentions going in that I'm going here to learn how to do my own thing. I find that very interesting because I think mine was kind of on the opposite where, or I knew I wanted to do something. I had an idea. I saw somebody that was a lot further along with a similar idea, so I joined them, not intentionally with that same intention of learning from it, but just hey, like this is further along. Let me join here and help grow this. And then it was through the 7 years of essentially help co-running this company that I was like, you know what, I have a much better idea that's going to be much bigger, and that's essentially where PlayerPrompts.ai came from. But to already have that like that knowledge or that know the know with all or whatever. There's a certain word or cliche saying I'm trying to say, but I can't think of it. The knowledge of knowing that you need to go and you need to learn, as opposed to throwing yourself in the fire that and getting burnt because there are so many things you don't know. So that was a very smart move because I don't know. Everybody learns it differently, but to know that you need to learn is the biggest part. Knowing that there's things that you don't know. I think I've said the word no about 100 times in the last 10 seconds. So we might actually have more no's than we do aha moments, but we need to kind of balance those out by the end of this.
Balance the scales,
Yeah,
balance the
let me
scales.
let me do a quick count. All right, we need to say aha a few more times. So now you've put in, you said about 4 years. You've learned all the things that you were looking to learn. Uh, I think chronologically we're around like 4 years. What is that,
Well,
like 2020?
2023, 2023.
Okay, 2023. So that's just 3 years ago, and now you are uh, like letting the company know, hey, I got this. I'm going to be working on my own thing. How do you part ways from the company that essentially taught you everything you wanted to know for the past 4 years?
Got laid off.
That
Uh,
makes things quick and easy.
so our what we did, our product was um, using AI to transform how Hollywood does market research. It's like you've heard of a pilot episode. Focus groups are how they do research on pilot episodes, right? They bring 50 people into a movie theater, they show them an episode, and they say, which characters do you like versus not like? Would you rather watch this at 7 p.m. on Tuesday or 8 p.m. on Wednesday? Um, it's a small data sample to try to make a multi-million dollar decision, and you're putting users in a space that doesn't represent where they would actually consume the product. So what we built was a platform that codified the story. So like story DNA, 150,000 chromosomes, levels of sex and violence, number of words dialogue exchanged between each character. And then we had the outcomes data. So Nielsen ratings, streaming, viewership demographics, box office receipts. And we have machine learning models that could predict based on a script the audience size, potential demographics, and different stories and characters and things to emphasize in marketing materials for different consumer demographics. So when the writers went on strike in May 2023, and listen, I always say, do what you got to do, right? Like this is business, negotiate. So, but there was no new scripts for us to work on, so revenue stalled, and we needed to downsize the team. So I actually led a substantial layoff. Dozens of people lost their jobs, and that was a real bummer. But that was a real growth. Like I learned a ton in that process, doing it humanely first and foremost, trying to help people find their next gig, to put them in a position to move on and continue, their career. And number three, like the tough decisions around we have this much budget, we got these people, who are we going to keep? And ultimately, this all happened at the time that OpenAI opened up their enterprise beta program, and we were able to automate a bunch of work using the first API from OpenAI. So that was like my hands-on experience with LLMs. And we got to a point where I had a conversation with the founder where I didn't have enough equity to have it be worth waiting it out. I was one of the more expensive people that was sort of on the we'd like to keep list. And it made most sense for everybody for me to no longer be with the business, take my severance, and go start something else. So I'm still close with that team. They've survived. The folks that we kept through that process are still there. The business, post writer strike came back online, and I'm really excited to see the continuation of that dream. And ultimately, I got what I needed, which was I learned about AI, I learned about company building, and got myself in a place where I was comfortable starting Vokal and wouldn't look back.
So, with this writer strike, are you seeing the writing on the wall before you're officially the one that gets let go? You're like, hey, it looks like they're gonna have to be making cuts, and then after that, having that experience with the AI that you've kind of been implementing, how quickly post getting let go were you like, okay, I've learned everything I want to learn. I've learned things I didn't know I wanted to learn. Now this is what I'm going to be working on. So from getting cut to 100%, I got an idea. What was that time period like?
I took 6 months to just like recharge. In hindsight, I wish it had been 4 months. I think the last 2 months, I started to feel some of my skills becoming a little bit more dull. Uh, and But I took 6 months to like recharge, reflect, and then it sort of just like woke up one morning. I got a push notification from ESPN encouraging me to watch a baseball game. And I was just like, I've had this app since I got an iPhone in high school. And I have never engaged with baseball content. I just don't like the sport very much. Why are they pushing this on me? Like they'd be much better off trying to get me to do almost anything else. And I was just like, this experience is not personalized. And that's like where the idea for Vokal began, was just me feeling like they have all this data on me. I should be able to experience something that is for me. Um, and that sort of idea was in January of 2024. Um, I then spent like 6 months thinking about what type of product would I build around this idea of using AI to personalize the fan experience. Um, Ended up incorporating the business in July of 2024. In hindsight, I thought I had a product idea at the time. Like in hindsight, given what we've built, like I had a thesis, that there was value in personalizing the fan experience. And at the time, we were very focused on sports betting. The angle there was the value of getting a download, like as an affiliate, is huge. A couple $100 in affiliate revenue. And the LTV of a sports better to a sports book is big. So started with sports betting because it seemed like a very high value component of the sports fan experience that, if we could increase engagement through personalization, there'd be a lot of value to be created there. Um, Sports betting and fantasy is still part of it. But what we found is, and I guess I'm jumping ahead, but we ended up building a voice product to create personalized podcasts that drive engagement on clients' apps rather than on social media. So, like, our big thesis is the reason why sports brands have so much mind share, but so much of the engagement happens on rented real estate, TikTok, Instagram, so on and so forth. Uh, so what we're trying to do is build a B2B product that brings that engagement into the client's app or the client's website through the draw of personalization. Um, and what we found is teams and leagues are super interested in this as well. So we've got clients in the betting space, but we found out pretty early that the product extended well beyond the fantasy and betting, application and subsector of the sports ecosystem.
How much time did it take to go from I want to use AI to personalize the fan experience to let's use AI to you turn text into voice? Like, how was there a lot of like, oh, let's do this. No, that's not a good idea. Let's do this. Like, how much trial and error or how much thought or brainstorming came in that period?
But I'll tell you how it happened. So I incorporated in July of 2024. So I'm gonna start working on this. Fantasy football season started. I'm a commissioner and I write a weekly newsletter for my league. Um, and I was like, listen, I use these open AI tools to like automate like a bunch of analyses and like writing at work. Like, let me see if I can automate this weekly newsletter. Um, and so I did that. I built before agents were a thing, I built basically an agent that automated the writing of my weekly newsletter. And I then ran an Instagram campaign to see if other people would be interested in getting, I called it personalized color commentary for your fantasy league. I had a but the product didn't, I hadn't built something that I could scale, but I wanted to see was it worth doing. A bunch of people signed up to a wait list, so I knew that I wasn't the only one that liked this idea of personalized color commentary. And then in October of 2024, Google launched Notebook LM's audio overview feature, which allows you to plug in some stuff and get a podcast. Um, and the breakthrough was in the natural the conversational realism. There are pauses, there's interruptions, there's laughter, there's stuttering. It actually sounded to that point 100 times more realistic than any of the other voice tools sounded in that moment. So I plugged my newsletter into Notebook LM, generated a podcast, shared it with my league, and the engagement was just off the charts. So then I did another Instagram campaign around that. People liked this idea. The challenge was it was mispronouncing player names. It wasn't editable. There was no like no consistency, no control of duration, um, and it didn't know sports jargon, right? There's just so many nuances to sports talk that just come naturally to us as fans. And the reason why this version off the shelf through Google didn't sound natural wasn't the quality of the voices and the voice models. It was that they were trained on books, not on sports talk. So that's ultimately what we built. It was a system for codifying the phonetics of sports talk, using that to then agentically write podcast transcripts that follow certain rules, brand guidelines. Like all of our clients can, we train the model on, like, for example, one of our MLB teams that we work with, they have a ballpark, not a stadium. And that's very important to them, is that they don't have a stadium, they have a ballpark. Uh, okay, we train the AI to only use that word, to never use the S word. Uh, um, Player name pronunciations. So we have a phonetical database of how to spell player names in a way that yields the proper pronunciation. So Stephen Curry, we spell with two F's instead of a PH, because otherwise it gets pronounced Stephen. Um, and then, sports specific jargon. So if we're creating soccer content, it's a match, not a game. It's a pitch, not a field. It's a kit, not a jersey. So we built this context layer that is sports specific. Um, and to me, I just felt drawn to audio because, well, I mentioned I have some learning disabilities. One of them is that I have no visual capacity. So I can't close my eyes and see a picture of the house I grew up in or my mom's face. I don't dream visually. I dream in sounds. So like I hear the first note of a song and I know what song it is. So I just had this gravitational pull towards audio, and the fact that people were resonating this idea of making sports talk personalized, that it resonated with me on a psychological level. There seemed to be receptivity from the fan base on an engagement level. And then the B2B value being this becomes a sponsorable asset in the same way that a podcast is sponsored, right? We have clients that are getting paid by Coca-Cola, by DraftKings to have sponsored segments in the content that we're creating. It seemed like a win-win-win in terms of value creation for all components of the ecosystem.
I don't I don't know if I, well, I definitely didn't know that about you, but I guess I didn't know that was a thing where the lack of visualization when closing your eyes and not being able to picture things on command or even off command, or the dreaming side of things. And it makes me think of, I don't know if you ever watched the Pharrell Williams did a biography, but he did it with Legos. I forgot what the name of that thing was, but I watched it and he was talking about how he when music is playing, he doesn't hear music, he sees music and colors and stuff. And
Mm.
so it's so the human brain is so interesting. Whether it's not even like on your end, you didn't treat this as a deficit. You treat this as a, hey, if this is how I experience it, so this is there's other people that are gonna want to experience it in the same way, and using that to your advantage. And I don't know, I'm just always fascinated by the human brain in general. So we figure out, okay, I want this to, let's plug this in here for this league. Okay, this is very inhumane. It doesn't sound real. It doesn't feel real. They're not pronouncing things right. I actually, before I recorded this, I recorded my own podcast for the day, talking about an event I was at earlier this week. And I'm not even going to try it, but the defensive tackle whose last name is Sue that played for Miami Dolphins for a bit,
And
like,
Domicon.
yeah, so in my whenever I have like a name, I have a split second pause of, should I dare attempt this, or should I just say the last name and move on, or the first name or whatever. So he said, I was like, I actually just avoided his name completely when referencing him, because people know what I mean when I say defensive tackle Sue. So this is 2024. I think this is when you and I crossed paths for the first time in October 2024 at Zero Lab. So we're now about a year and a half after that. What are the biggest, I wouldn't say changes, but the biggest, I guess you can say changes that have happened from inception to, I was going to say February, March, April. It's now April 2026.
Yeah. I The biggest change is automation. So when we launched the product in August of 2025, and it's a self-serve, no-code platform for creatives. So they were going in using our platform to create audio, marketers at sports betting affiliates, at pro teams and leagues, hands-on creating content, listening to it. And then we built an audio player that they can embed in their app and their site or link to in their direct consumer marketing campaigns, email, SMS. Very a la carte, right? Not that scalable, but it took them 2 hours. Some folks, it was taking them 2 hours to write an email. For us, they could just give us like a voice, like a brain dump of ideas. We'd create a podcast, and in 5 minutes, they'd have content they could put out. So, we were able to expedite, but still limited by the number of hours in a person's day. Now, actually, like this week, we launched our API. So the creative person can configure the campaign. What's the business goal they're trying to achieve? Who's the audience they're going after? Um, what are the brand guidelines that need to be followed? Um, and what's the source material? Like, what's the content going to be based on? A developer can plug in one line of code, and then we're able to ingest whether it's user level data. This person follows this team. This is their favorite player. They've bought, tickets to, nosebleed tickets versus 50-yard line, row one tickets. All the stuff that the client has on users can now be plugged in as context to help personalize content. So right now we could create in theory up to 1 million minutes of audio per month. We've built a fact checking layer that can identify hallucinations, then route those out of the system. Um, so scale, I'd say, is the biggest game changer. Scale, automation. We still stay true to our roots of authenticity. Our goal is to not replace creatives, but to allow them to tell their stories on a scale that makes mass personalization possible, uh, and sort of trust, reliability. So we're not AI slop. If we wanted to be AI slop, we would have gone direct to consumer. But I think what our grounding our technology in the brand guidelines was like the one of the biggest decisions that we made, because it allows the content to be an extension of the brand, an extension of the creator's voice by giving them the keys to control the direction that the content goes, in terms of the editorial perspective, the level of edginess, the level of statistical rigor, right? Something for Bleacher Report should sound very different than something for Sports Illustrated. And I think that's the biggest decision, and then the API allows us to do that at scale.
I love it. And then, of course, your recent partnership with the UFL. Me being in Orlando, went to the first Orlando Storm game, and I went to the. I think I was just looking for like their depth chart to see if it was on UFL.com, and I go to UFL.com, and the very first article has that Vokal embedded playlist, and I was like, "Look at my guy, Mark." That was like a friendship proud moment seeing that there. So I'm happy
That's
for
awesome.
all the stuff, all the awards and everything you got going on. So now that we kind of caught ourselves up to present day, the thing I like wrapping these episodes up on is to now look back on the entire timeline that we just covered from beginning to now. There's a lot of different things that happen both inside and outside your control.
Mhm.
Things we call butterfly effects. So out of all of these things, what is the number one single event that you contribute, whether it was in or out of your control, to getting you to where you are now today?
Reaching out to Chris Shreve on LinkedIn, without question. I don't do much direct outreach. I very rarely do cold outreach. In January 2024, when I was like, okay, personalizing fandom, that's my thing. Uh, I wanted to learn, so I started looking on LinkedIn who's writing insightful stuff about sports tech, and uh, Chris was on a short list of like three people that I wanted to connect with. I sent him a DM. I said, I really liked what you said about this. I have three questions. Can I get 20 minutes? We ended up talking for an hour. He then messaged me the next day and was like, dude, I haven't stopped thinking about this. Like, let's talk again. We talked for 2 hours. He then came on as an advisor for a couple of months. We established that like we had shared values, great rapport. So then he came on as a consultant, working part time, and then 2 months later he joined. He sold his company that he was running at the time to join full time as co-founder. And he's the one who had the idea to go B2B. Like I said, I was running Instagram campaigns to see if people wanted to use what I was building to create color commentary. He'd say, no, 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 you should be doing that for Sleeper. We haven't gotten into Sleeper yet, but like he was the one that pushed me towards B2B. He's been the plug that's connected us to all of the talent on my team. Christiana Yebra, Ben Hendricks, those are all people that Chris knew and brought into the ecosystem. So that's my butterfly effect. Was something about Chris made me him. He's like the first person I reached out to cold in like my entire career, and he's my co-founder and one of my best friends now.
When when you just said, first off, love that story, and I knew Chris before that not incident, but before you met him and he sold off his company and stuff. So I've definitely been following him for a bit as well. But when you kind of mentioned that, like he was the one that said go to B2B, the first thing that popped in my head is the scene from The Social Network story movie on Facebook where Justin Timberlake's character is like, you know what? Drop just call it Facebook. I was like, I just picture Chris doing like, you know what? Let's do B2B. It's a very similar moment in my head anyway. But Mark, 100% appreciate you hopping on here and sharing your story with us. Um, Knowing that Vokal's B2B and knowing that there are not just individuals and personal sports fans watching this, but potential people representing other companies, if they do want to incorporate Vocal into their content stuff, how can they get a hold of you?
Get a hold of me, mark at Vokol.ai. But the real person to talk to is Chris. I've got my hands on keyboard building the tech. Chris leads all of our business development, and so Chris at Vokol.ai. And yeah, I mean, whether you're sold on an AI believer or just sort of curious how this new category of tech can help make personalization possible, we'd love to talk.
All right. Well, you have it there. So, thank you guys for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you subscribe to this channel because we got a lot more before and we kind of have a lot more coming up after. Um, Mark, any final words of anything you want to share here?
Go Cavs. We qualified for the playoffs yesterday. So go
I
Cavs.
might have to edit that out. I might have to take that out of there. But thanks again, Mark, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
All right, Travis. Great catching up with you.